Good afternoon, everybody. You are listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is now 11 a.m. We've got a great show lined up for you today. Well, if you know, we've been talking about Financial Literacy Month for months, literally. Since October of last year, Houston Money Week, or what we know it here locally as, comes off of Financial Literacy Month. So we've had a kind of a focus on that. But it is also Social Security Awareness Month. So this is kind of a good topic to do a deep dive in, and we're going to be joined by Beau Henderson. He is a financial advisor. He is an author. He is an RICP and an NSSA certified expert, really, on Social Security. So we keep listening. Stay tuned. But if you are a longtime listener, you know we always reserve just the first few minutes of the show to tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Houston and the Gulf Coast area when it comes to financial literacy. So as I did mention earlier, April Financial Literacy Month, we've had a build-up all the way since October. Well, we've been planning since October, but really a push since January, and we are finally here, smack dab in April. We have made it. I want to say we've made it through Financial Literacy Month, or that we've made it through Houston Money Week. But in reality, what's known as Houston Money Week after 11 years has grown into many different free financial education workshops that take place citywide. And so even though we've made it through kind of the focus week, there are events still taking place. So one of the big ones that happened last weekend was the Houston Art Car Parade. Houston Money Week did have a car in that. This is our second year that we've participated in the Art Car Parade, and so we got a little bit of an upgrade. We've got a giant pink Volkswagen that looks like a piggy bank. The first year, a lot of this stuff was styrofoam or temporary, and now they've actually welded some metal stuff. There's a coin sticking out of the top of it now, so it really, really looks sharp. Ricky, who is with Houston Money Week on the leadership team, has done a lot of the work on that, so I have to give him props on that because it looks really, really good. But we did make it through the Art Car Parade. Second year, we had the International Children's Festival that was the weekend before that, and then a lot of the offshoot events have either happened the week of Houston Money Week or still going on. And so I would point people to the website, which is www.houstonmoneyweek.org. A couple of different ways to look at it. It is a dynamic calendar, and so you can either look at the date, okay, what's coming up still before the end of the month, or you can look geographically where something is located close to you. So you can put your zip code in there. Here is something. We did have our nonprofit partners participating in the VITA program that we're doing free tax preparation for low to moderate income. But since we are here, we've actually passed tax day, so that's something we can check off on our calendar here when it comes to financial literacy. Now, of course, if you file an extension, that's something different. But so again, if you do go to that HoustonMoneyWeek.org website, still have events going on. One of the rules of Houston Money Week is all of the events are free and open to the public, so there's no charge. If you're looking for something on college planning, if you're looking for something on budgeting, credit cards, entrepreneurship for small business owners, it is all there. With that, let's go ahead and get Beau on the line so we can maximize our time here. Beau, are you there?
Hey, how's it going, Chris?
It's going great. It's going great. Thank you for joining the show today.
Oh, absolutely. You know, you're speaking my language. I love all the talk about financial literacy, because one of the big things that even led me to do the Social Security book recently was I believe there's a financial literacy problem in this country, and even beyond that, a retirement literacy, and a subset of that is even Social Security literacy. So you're really singing my song there on the show.
Well, good. So I think we have a lot of things in common. As a financial advisor, I went to your website and I was looking just to kind of get ready for this show, and I was like, you're right there with everything that I'm participating in and asking. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today. But for listeners that want to get to know you a little bit better, what's the best website for them to go to?
Yeah, if you want to find out kind of our total, we call it a total financial planning, to where we're interested in getting the money part right. That's crucial, but we're also interested in making sure we do that in the context of as money as the tool to live the retirement or the life that actually is exciting, meaningful, and fulfilling to you. So I think some people miss that connection. They just maybe go in and do what a neighbor said they should do, or a brother-in-law, or whatever it is. And I want to make sure that we're really tying those two things together. But RichLifeAdvisors.com is just a lot of, same kind of thing. I do a lot of podcast articles. I believe that getting people good information, that knowledge is power when it comes to finances and retirement. If we have good information, we can make better decisions.
Absolutely, and that's just so that they know you. I mentioned that you're the founder, the CEO of RichLife Advisors. You do have books out there. In fact, one of your most recent one is on the subject of Social Security. Let's start on that. Why did you feel the need to write that book?
No, it's a funny story. About this was almost 8 years ago now. I was sitting down with a mentor of mine, very smart businessman, and he said, "Beau, I've got to share something with you. I shafted my spouse." And I said, whoa, Jerry, I don't know if I want to hear this story. But then he proceeded to tell me, he said, no, what happened when he was 66 years old, he called the Social Security Administration and said, hey, I'm full retirement age, what should I do? And they advised him, even though he was making a ton of money and didn't need it, they said, you're full retirement age, there's no threshold anymore on how much you can earn, you might as well take it. And he did. And what he didn't realize, again, very smart, savvy financial guy, but what he didn't realize that he was sharing with me now is that if he would have waited to 70, it would have increased the benefit his wife will get when he dies by about $1,200 a month. And in their specific situation, their ages and his health, she'll probably outlive him a good 10 to 15 years. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars he unknowingly took away from his spouse by just not knowing the rules. And that was the day I committed. I said, hey, if a smart guy like this gets this wrong, a lot of people get this wrong. And I realized that was the part as financial advisors, for most of the people I talk to, Social Security is half or more of their retirement income. Yet it's a subject that there's very little information out there, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. But I think it's one of the most important decisions that we can get right, because most people need every penny that they're entitled to make this work.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think it's one of those topics that when you look over the life of a person, that bucket of Social Security money is huge. But you mentioned one of the things right there. When people think of retirement dollars, they don't necessarily think of that spousal, that it's also a widow's benefit, or that it's a disability benefit, and so those are important too. One of the things that you mentioned is how to ensure your spouse receives the full benefits of your Social Security policy. Can you go a little bit further in that?
A lot of times, and you kind of hit on this, Chris, when you brought this up, is too often people look at all these retirement decisions, whether it's my 401k, my Social Security, they're in a vacuum. What do I do with this? When do I claim my pension? When do I do my Social Security? But they're not really integrated into a strategy. And when it comes to Social Security, it's very specific. We got to look at longevity, health, the age difference between spouses, and we really need to, when it comes to a spouse issue, we need to look at how do we get the best benefit or the ability to use the most money over both our lives. Because what happens, and this is one of the big mistakes I see, is people don't, when one spouse dies, the lower benefit goes away, so you lose a benefit. And on average, about a third of the income drops off. But a lot of times people aren't looking ahead 10, 15, 20 years saying, okay, when that happens, are we in the right position? Do our expenses either adjust to fit that, or do we have something else come into play to replace that Social Security? So I think that's one of the big things is just modeling ahead and say, okay, when one of us dies, because one of us will die first, most likely, what happens to the strategy then, and are we prepared for that?
So that's very important, the things that you mentioned, because I think a lot of times people will get their Social Security statement and they'll just look at it from an individual level. But some of the things that you mentioned that you kind of need to know, if it's a couple, if there's an age difference, you talked about longevity. All of these things are factors that need to be taken into consideration when coordinating or making a decision there. Another thing that you mentioned in the book is the $20,000 mistake that most everyone is making. What is that about?
One of the ones where I see 20, 40 to 60, it's really $20,000 to $60,000 is the average mistake. I kind of erred on the low end when I shared that, the $20,000 mistake. It's really more like the $20,000 to $60,000 mistake. It's understanding spousal benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have a lot of couples not realize, okay, when I'm full retirement age, as a spouse, I'm entitled to half of my spouse's benefits or my own, whichever's higher. Now, this gets confusing, and most of the questions I get about the spousal benefit come up around this. So really, let me take a step back. There's really two groups anymore. They snuck some changes under the rug in 2015 of how these things work. So if our listeners are born before January 2nd, 1954, they can choose what's called a restricted application, and they can choose to either take their benefit or half of their spouse's, regardless of what that is. They can restrict their application to be either or. So it gives a lot of flexibility. So that's one benefit, that group, if you or your spouse or both of you fall in that born before January 2nd, 1954. Now, if you're born after that day, the January 2nd, 1954, everything falls under what's called a deemed filing. So when you file, it means you're filing for all benefits that apply to you, and you're going to get the highest. You're either going to get your full benefit or half of your spouse's, whichever's higher.
So this is important because the decision to do that, one of the things that you mentioned is there were some changes that happened back in 2015, but now we've got some important dates that should be on your radar if you're looking to turn on your retirement or your Social Security. You mentioned that 1954, and then after that, the deeming. But just the idea of the spousal benefit being more complex than most people think intuitively when they see it.
Right.
And so as what I found is a lot of financial advisors don't really touch upon Social Security like you do. It is one of those things that people need to know. Gosh forbid they have a pension that they're trying to coordinate with it.
Right.
So one of the other things that you mentioned is how to retire part-time while increasing your Social Security benefits. What is that about?
Yeah, and that's a conversation. It's a little bit of mind shift about retirement, but it really seems to be the case, especially the last 3, 4, 5 years. And what we're talking about, I think there's a mentality that I work or I retire. And I've got a lot of clients now later in their careers, and say for an example, this client's making $80,000 a year. His thinking is, okay, when can I stop and go from 80,000 to zero? A lot of our conversation is okay, can we step down? Can you maybe work 2 days a week there and bring home $30,000 a year? Or could you do something completely different with less stress and bring home $24,000 a year to kind of bridge those middle parts of retirement? And how it continues to increase your benefit is because Social Security, your calculation for your benefit is made up of your highest 35 years of earnings. So for most people, even cutting back half time or more, it's replacing either some zeros or some early years, maybe when they were in their teens and just started working, or mothers that might have stayed home for some years raising kids. We're actually continuing to raise the benefit, but we're actually stepping down into retirement. And I actually love that strategy a lot because I see a lot of problems that we run into is when people are kind of cold turkey. They're working for 40 years, stop one day, and then they're retired the next. And then they're trying to figure it out. That step-down approach kind of gives them a taste of what it's like, and really I see it help them navigate it more successfully as they continue to transition.
Absolutely. One of the things you just mentioned was that that when they calculate that benefit, they're looking back at your highest 35 years, an average. And so one of the things that you when you talk about them doing a part-time job or something like that, it's getting rid of a couple of those zeros in that average can be powerful.
Absolutely, or very low years, because a lot of times the first 5 or 6 years people started really early, and 40 years ago, $10,000 might have been a decent salary then, but now you're more than offsetting that with part-time work.
Absolutely, and we're talking about their entire lifetime, from that first job at serving ice cream to college to so it's their entire lifespan. So very, very important. What things could you tell somebody who is maybe a divorcee when it comes to Social Security?
Yeah, so divorced. So we talked a lot about spousal benefits. If you are married to somebody for at least 10 years and haven't remarried, you're entitled to the same benefit as if it was a spousal benefit. A lot of people don't realize that and don't realize the rules, but a lot of times you can actually claim a benefit on an ex-spouse, especially, there's some situations we run into that seem unfortunate that maybe somebody went and built their career, somebody stayed home with the kids and really didn't get their own benefit, and then it doesn't work out later in life. So that's a way sometimes we can go back and capture half of the ex-spouse's benefit so that you do have some Social Security coming in to help with retirement. So that's something what I tell people, and some people don't know. They were divorced 20 years ago. They don't know what's happened since. And what I tell people, any of these topics we're talking about, whether it's a spousal benefit, whether it's this ex-spouse, whether it's a widow benefit, any of these things, if the topic applies to you, dig in, educate yourself on that specific thing that applies to you. And that's why I wrote the book, so it's very easy to reference. And then let's go to socialsecurity.gov and print out your current benefit. And let's ask the questions. Okay, am I entitled to a spousal benefit? You might have to set an appointment and take a divorce decree to the local office, but find out. Worst case you'll find out is no, you're not, but at least you know. You're not one of these stories that I see every month in the Social Security workshops I do where people have left money on the table just because they didn't know.
Absolutely, and that is frustrating as an advisor when you get to them a little bit late. So, and so much good that you can do in advance, but if it's late, then sometimes they can't make. Do you have any stories like that where you've seen people make mistakes that kind of stick out in your memory?
Well, the one, of course, the first one I shared, it really got me on the path, and it made me realize. It's a shame on us as an industry of financial advisors that it being over half of our clients' income that we don't take the time to learn about this information for the most part. And most don't because either they don't know where to get the information and they're not necessarily directly compensated for it. And I think that's a shame and a disservice to our clients. So that story was really what got me on the path of being really proactive on that because there's not enough information, enough people doing that. Another story, and this is very recent, and this is kind of a fail but a success too. This was a local workshop talking about Social Security strategies. I had a lady come, 63 years old. Her spouse died 20 years ago. Came to the workshop, learned some stuff, called me last week crying from the Social Security Administration office. And what had happened was 20 years ago when her spouse died, she went to the Social Security Administration office, and they said there's no spousal benefits. The thing is, that was a partial truth. For her at that age, she wasn't 60 years old yet. There wasn't a spousal benefit available, but she is entitled to one once she reached 60 years old. So although she's now 63, she called me crying because she was getting by on about $1,250 a month with her current employment, and she just found out next month she's going to start getting a $2,500 widow benefit too. So basically, having the right information tripled her income and truly changed her life. And that's not a sexy $1 million story, but that's what's so rewarding about making sure there's people out there all over the place that just with the right information can do so much better.
Oh, absolutely. So I have similar stories when I work a lot with teachers, and so they'll, in the teacher's lounge, they'll say certain, hey, we don't get any Social Security. Well, that's not quite true.
Right.
But specifically situations like that where there's widow's benefit, the sooner that they find out and get the right information, the sooner they can get that benefit turned on. What would you tell somebody who has like a state pension or a federal pension? Are there any things that they need to watch out for?
Well, yeah, you just got to be aware, and this is one of the things I find that, especially with teachers here, and I'm in Georgia and Atlanta, is that they have great pensions, but I don't think they're taught early on when they start in their careers on the offset, that they're necessarily going to offset their Social Security or it's going to be reduced. And so I think the thing, if that applies to you, and a lot of times they just heard of it, but they don't know, my advice there is seek out somebody that can help you figure out that number and that exact offset for your situation. Because going into retirement with clarity, even if it's not as great as you hope, knowing what it is much more refreshing because we can know how to adjust. We might know, hey, we might have to do that step down retirement for 2 years, but then it'll work. But get clarity on that situation. And it's kind of like this overall Social Security conversation. If you know this topic applies to you, let's research it, let's dig in, let's make sure we get the right information and not find out or be surprised later, because that's when problems come up and we tend to have less options and we just wait.
So if I am an individual out there and I have a state pension and I log into socialsecurity.gov and I download that PDF and I'm looking at, hey, I'm getting X number of dollars up on that page too, are you saying that may not be correct?
That may not be correct. You've got to understand the offset rules for your specific pension in your state.
So I that's a situation I see all the time. So I just want to make sure that is right. Then you're the official statement that you're getting sometimes is incorrect if you're getting that state pension, and that's super duper important. So seeking out somebody who can help you with that and really get you some accurate information is important. What other things do you see as kind of roadblocks when people are trying to reach retirement when it comes to Social Security?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and one of the biggest questions is fear. It's in the 70s. Over 70% of people file earlier than they have to, and I think one of the big reasons is fear that it's sustainable, right? That it's going to be there for them. So there's a mentality of that fear that, hey, it might run out, so I better get what I can while I can. And what I tell to that group of people, and it's good news and it's bad news, the system's really not set up to work, because it was a lot of the rules we still have today were set up when people died before they were 65. So it worked wonderful, right? You paid out hardly anybody, and you had a lot of people paying in. And now we're living well into our 80s on average. So it has to adjust. But what I tell people in the demographic going through that I work with in particular is that if you're 50 north, there's things been in play. We've already seen full retirement age go from 65 all the way up to 67. We see them continually raise the cap on earnings that are taxed into Social Security. So we see even proposals to take an extra tax of income tax. So we see things that will sustain it. And it's not as the reserve is what they talk about will be bankrupt, but there's still a ton of money going through that system. But when we sit down to model and plan, I say if you're 50 north, I feel comfortable based on the information we know and the things, because it'd be political suicide for a politician to take away a benefit to this group, right? Nobody's going to get away with that. But what they'll continue to do is change those rules and spread it out and kick the can down the road, so to speak. So again, that group 50 north, I say we can model, and I feel comfortable modeling based on the information as we have it today. But we get beyond that, we get 50 and under. My message shifts, and my message is, okay, the government, we've already seen companies aren't going to take care of us like they did our parents and grandparents, and the government's probably not going to be able to either. So for that group younger, I say it's putting even more responsibility on you, so we need to start earlier, we need to be more diligent, and we need to make sure we're preparing ourselves for retirement.
I agree 100% with everything you just said there. But what you said was super important, because you started with the idea of fear, and the idea of, well, is these reserves for Social Security, the trust, are they sustainable? But one of the things you alluded to is if people are scared, they make bad decisions. So tell us a little bit about, the temptation there is to, hey, this money's going to run out. I need to take it as soon as I can. What happens if you take early retirement?
Sure. Yeah. No. Great question. These are things people need to know. And then at the same time, it's individual for each person in each situation. That we can take Social Security as early as 62 years old, but if you start at 62, you're going to get a 25% reduction from that full retirement age that you see on your statement. So yes, you can start earlier, but you're going to get less benefit, and it's going to start at less benefit for the rest of your life. Now, on the other side, you have what's called delayed retirement credit. So every year you wait from full retirement age all the way up to age 70, you can get an 8% increase per year in your income for the rest of your life. So in that scenario, for most people, that's the 32% increase. And that's where you'll see people going from $2,000 to $3,000, $2,500 to $3,700, things like that by waiting. And that was my buddy whose benefit, he didn't let grow that extra $1,200 to leave his spouse later in life. So where does that work? It might seem like just understanding those rules is important, and it might seem like across the board, hey, everybody wait till you're 70, but sometimes we can't.
Right.
Sometimes there's health issues. Sometimes there's situations with life expectancy or illness, and it actually makes sense to claim earlier. Or I have some people that can just afford to. They can afford to take the loss, and they'd rather have the money in because they got assets in other places. But as far as a decision, or some of the other pieces are, like we said, sometimes we can take one benefit early to get some more money sooner into the situation, but max out the biggest benefit. And that's a strategy. Anytime we can afford to max out the bigger, it's going to leave that second-to-die spouse with the biggest pension possible, so to speak. So a lot of strategies, but it's really important to know how that, you can choose anytime between 62 and 70, but there's either deductions or credits based on when you pick. And another important thing that comes up is if you do file early between 62 and 66 for most people, there's an earnings threshold. So if you're 62, you can't earn more than about $17,040 a year, or they're going to start taking away $1 of your benefit for every $2 you earn above that. So sometimes a big rule of thumb for me is let's claim the benefit when we need it to pay our bills and lifestyle. If we're just taking a benefit thinking it's a good idea to put in our savings account, we might be making a mistake because there's nowhere else I can get you a guaranteed 8% increase on that bucket of funds by delaying it a year.
Again, I agree with all of that. So that's super duper important because you mentioned some of those things there that it is going to be different with each and every person. However, if you take it early, you can count on, two different reductions there. One is that the reduction for taking it early, but if you decide that you're going to keep working, then you mentioned that deeming or that earnings threshold. So you kind of get ding twice on that, and so that's super important. You mentioned the delayed retirement credit. So on average, they're getting about an 8% return when they push each and every year. But there are situations where people have longevity issues. What if that person comes to you and they say, I've got a year to live or something like that?
Turn it on now. Right?
It really is more complex, I think, than most people think when they just look at their Social Security statement. Well, we're bumping right here towards the end of the show. We got just a few more minutes left. One of the things I wanted to ask you, I am a RICP, as you are, but one of the things that I have been considering is the NSSA certification. Now, that is something that you've gone and done, and before we got on the air, you were telling me, this is pretty good here. Can you tell me a little bit about that as an advisor? How does that differentiate yourself?
Sure, and Mark Kiner, he has done a really great job with that designation, making it very valuable and getting it credentialed out there at the National Social Security Association. But what it's done for me, I believe I've had the designation for going on 3 years now, is, remember early in the conversation I said, shame on us in this industry, that financial advisors, with this being something that's over half, our clients hire us to help them navigate this, and a big part of that's the income plan. And with Social Security being over half of most people's income, I think we should know about this, and we should understand this, and we should be able to help our clients navigate that. And that's been one of the tools, is the training is really good. That I told you there's two reasons that financial advisors don't help with this. One, they don't have the additional training and education and information to help with it, and the other was they don't have a direct way to get compensated, so they just don't bother. But that's the NSSA designation, the credentialing, the education that you have to go through, and the tests that you have to take. I find that it equips you well to start helping people with these conversations. Then what happens is you start helping people. The experience takes you to another level of competency to truly be an expert. And unfortunately, because of the scenarios that we described, the bar is really low. So as you learn, you go through and you learn the basics of what areas people can use strategy and get more benefits. Pretty soon, you're in the top 10% of your profession just by having a base knowledge. And then imagine if you continue to dig into that and help clients with that and grow. So it's really a differentiator. But even more than that, I believe it's something that our clients need, the people need out there. I hit on there's a financial literacy problem in this country. On top of that, a retirement literacy subset of that. There's a Social Security literacy problem, because you would think Social Security Administration would be a place we could call to get the information, but they're not even set up legally to be able to give you advice. They can tell you how to file the form. They can get you maybe on the right website, but they can't advise you on a spousal benefit. Do I take it here? Do I take it there? Do I start drawing from my 401k first, then turn to my Social Security, or vice versa?
Beau,
I think having that designation, yep.
we are right here at the end of the show, but